What's up guys, it's Tusk here, and today we're going to be talking about inheritable traits in Crusader Kings 3. Everything you'll ever need to know about them, how they're mathematically inherited by their children, and the fact that even if someone doesn't look like they have an inheritable trait, they might just do beneath the surface. Inheritable traits are arguably the best thing in the entire game, other than possibly specific claims during the feudal age. Inheritable traits significantly boost not only your stats, but your character's descendants' stats, and ultimately you can only control one character, and that is you, and then your heir, and your heir after that. But your inheritable traits will enhance the characters of your brothers and sisters, nephews, cousins, and are there any other descendants that you have, meaning that you can push them to gain other titles in other parts of the world. This is what makes inheritable traits so honestly incredible. Just like your dynasty points that you put into with renown, inheritable traits also increase the power of your dynasty, but mostly towards your close relatives rather than your distant ones. But if you take certain dynasty perks, that will dramatically increase the amount of dynasty members that actually have inheritable traits. And the more stats your dynasty members have, generally speaking, the better. It'll be easier for them to hold on to those titles that they get, in turn promoting even more renown because they have more titles, and then allowing you to put more points into those dynasty members, which may potentially increase the amount of inheritable traits you get if you go down the blood tree. Intellect is the most expensive and arguably the best, and most likely what you think is the best inheritable trait in the game. Intellect is your quick, intelligent, and genius traits, and they are significantly more expensive. As you can see right here, 240 for the genius trait, and the others are cheaper than that, and we'll get to them later. But most importantly is that the genius trait has so many hidden variables behind it. Not only is the genius trait able to give you 5 in every stat but prowess and increase your learning capabilities by 30%, it also increases the character's rationality by plus 200. Every AI in Crusader Kings has a specific number of stats hidden behind them that influence their behavior, and rationality is probably the best out of all those hidden stats. Rather than the AI making random decisions and seemingly suiciding into their neighbor with twice the men, they are more likely to reserve their resources and actually make reasonable decisions, give or take, as they are an AI at the end of the day. But at least this time they're not going to suicide those in, and actually possibly even expand their realm and maybe become a duke instead of a count. So generally speaking, rationality is a pretty good thing, but what's even better is the educational benefits of the intellectual traits. All the intellectual traits are brilliant for education, especially if the child has them, which is why you want to try and get those inheritable traits on those children as soon as possible. But the power of this has been somewhat decreased, as now that the courtier is a thing and there is a lot of cultural ties to education. But if you really want to min-max it, I made a video on this before the expansion on how education works and is calculated, and I'll put a link to that in the description. So now that we are past genius, which is generally considered as the best trait in the game, let's actually start talking about how inheritable traits are calculated and how you can increase the chances of this actually happening. Now, when talking about inheritable traits and how inheritance works, genes are passed down via inactive and active genes, just like in real life actually. Active genes are what you see. If you see the genius trait, if you see those candles, then you know for a fact that they are a genius. But there is such a thing called inactive inheritance. Inactive inheritance is when the child does have the trait, it's just not actually activated. The gene is there, but not present in the child, which means they can still pass it down. So if you take one party that's a genius and marry them and have children with another party that's a genius, and they have a child that doesn't seem to have the genius trait, they might actually still have the gene, but they just don't have it actively present. So that means if you take that child and then marry them to a genius, the chance of having a genius child is significantly higher than if someone didn't have the inactive trait. or active trait, of course. So if we take a child, as you can see here, and one of them has the inactive trait and one of them has the active trait, the chance of having a child is 50%. So we can see right here, but if they both have the active trait, the chances are 80%, which is pretty significant. But if they have the inactive trait, we can see right here that the chances are 150%. So even if you do not create a child with an active genius trait, they will always have the inactive trait. But if they, have children and then just with someone else that doesn't have any inactive or active traits, then they'll slowly disperse until eventually the gene is probably going to be gone. The body traits Herculean, Robust, and Hale in Crusader Kings 3 are really good if you want your characters to survive, giving 8 prowess, 1 health, and 15 attraction. The trait is a fairly strong trait at a cheaper rate than Genius, but at the same time it is not actually that significant if you just want to play the game straightforward. It's more of a specialized stat and much better later on rather than at the start of the game. That being said, it does have some pretty significant advantages of if you all have the Herculean trait, then that pretty much means that you're not going to be much of an issue in if a plague comes in, if smallpox comes in, or things like that, you're much more likely to survive. And I have a video on the entirety of how health works, which I will put in the description. But also every single family member, if you happen to be Norse or things like that, and you make them shield maidens, or you take some of the cultural traditions that make it so that everyone can fight, make it so both men and women can fight, every single one of your children will be able to be useful in combat. You're going to have some of the best knights available to you. That is probably the best thing about Herculean. Now, on the other hand, though, there is something else quite interesting about Herculean, kind of a hidden statistic, is that it increases the chance of a martial education through the knighthood cultural innovation. So if you have knighthood, which is in the high medieval age, then you're more likely to get the champion's traits, so the ones where it gives you an extra bit of prowess, so you might get 1, 2, 3, or 4 prowess, then you're significantly higher chance of getting those if you have any of the body traits. This also includes giant as well. It also increases your chances, but in fact, if you have Herculean and giant, your chances of getting a 4-star one is significantly higher. So yeah, that is Herculean. Now, the beauty traits are arguably the best in the entire game, depending on your playstyle, but more if you play as a woman, since the vast majority of AI characters are attracted to women. It is almost certainly going to be a very viable strategy in the game, especially from ages 16 to 50, which is where attraction takes into effect. So as long as you play as a woman between ages 16 to 50, attraction is a major player, and this is where the beauty traits come in. So comely, pretty, and beautiful are some of the best traits in the entire game, not only because they're significantly cheaper and they increase the amount of children you can have, therefore increasing your renown and just having an overall better impact on a lot of different factors in the game, but also the massive plus 30 attraction beautiful gives is very significant, and at only 120 points, literally half of what Genius is. Admittedly, it doesn't give you as much of a stat boost in what you might see as direct stats, but the attraction boost is a massive plus 30 opinion for pretty much everybody in the entire game. Definitely the vast majority of rulers, to say the least, and you have a significantly higher chance of course as having children. Now, what you're going to see on screen at the moment is me playing as a woman with the beautiful trait as the Holy Roman Empire, and one of the main advantages to being liked by everyone. Basically, because I'm liked by everyone, literally everyone that's surrounding me, I can slowly gain their opinion and trust. And while I take the diplomacy tree, where I can get a specific perk point in the over vastly point, and with the new grandeur system, you can quite easily, as long as you play as a courtly culture, start vassalizing kingdoms and all the duchies and all the counties. And as you'll see very soon, even France will literally fall under my rule as Holy Roman Empress, as the Kaiserin. It is honestly quite ridiculous how powerful this is. But at the same time, the moment I hit 50/51, all of my likelihood is gone. But as long as I play it correctly, I will be able to keep everyone's opinion high by simply having a lot of prestige and using that fame advantage to maintain that structure and not get any rebellions. So as you can see, because we are a diplomatic court, we get an increase in all of our vassalage scaling with our grandeur. This is literally what makes this so powerful, this new effect that the new expansion has came in with the court system. And as you can see, we have dramatically increased our borders due to the fact that we absorbed France, Croatia, Sicily. So much has increased. We have Corsica. There is an insane amount we can do this, and next will be Denmark, and then Sweden and Norway, etc. And due to the fact that we're so liked, as long as the Pope isn't homosexual, then we'll consistently have a massive amount of gold income we can continuously keep getting, even if we go into debt, as you can see I am right here. But it doesn't even matter. Inbreeding in Crusader Kings 3 is one of the strongest strategies in the game in order to maintain and strengthen the bloodline. These traits are so good when combined. Like when you have all three of them, it's just insane. And strengthen the bloodline just makes it so much easier to actually get them. And it's pretty much almost always worth it as long as you calculate it within between. You do not want the inbred trait, that is for certain. So you'll want to do selective breeding in order to make sure that you minimize the chances of getting any of the negative traits and always maintain the beneficial traits. And the closer you get to the strengthened bloodline, the better. Now, these are the inbred traits that you can end up with. Pretty much all of these are signs that you are getting close to getting in the inbred trait. Probably the worst here is bleeder and sterile/barren, since they give massive negatives, as you can see right here. Absolutely just destroying, like the person's going to die before they're 40 pretty much, especially if they don't have Herculean, but if they do, it can be worth it. Giant is probably the best, as well as albino. Lisping and stuttering and all that aren't too bad. Dwarf can be quite annoying with -4 prowess, but generally speaking these aren't horrendous. That -30 attraction though is quite horrendous for having children, but over time, you know, it's not too detrimental. A -1.5 to health, not horrendous, and it's definitely worth it if you're actually managing to maintain these. But the biggest issue is that if you get any of these traits, you cannot get strength from the bloodline. There needs to be no negative traits in order to get strengthen the bloodline. Now, something important to mention is that every single trait at the end of the day has a natural prevalence. It can just randomly happen on birth and can be just spawned randomly with a 0.5 chance, say for melancholic here. Truly unfortunate. Lunatic 0.5, but as you can see, as it gets considerably worse, generally speaking, it just becomes a lower chance. So you're much more likely to have a random child have 0.5 to become homely than to become hideous, which is quite important. You know, no one wants to have imbecile. Thankfully, only has a 0.05% chance, because imbecile is horrible to get. It's a -8 to all stats. Quick 0.5, until, as you can see, it seems to follow this sort of pattern of as the traits get more extreme and better or worse, they have a much more scarcity. But as you can see, with the only exception being Fecund having a just straight up 0, but unless you have that dynasty trait, and the inbred traits are the only ones that seem to maintain that 0.5% chance of actually happening. So any of these can technically spawn spontaneously, just purely by chance. And I just wanted to mention that at the end of the video, so it doesn't mean you've accidentally inbred necessarily or stuff like that, but it also means that you could just be going for claims and accidentally get a genius, which would be absolutely amazing. So that's it for inheritable traits in Crusader Kings 3. If you found this helpful or enjoyed, please leave a like on the video, it definitely helps me out. And if you want to see some more Crusader Kings 3 content, please consider subscribing. And if you have anything specific you want me to talk about, then just comment it in the video below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.